Thank you so much for coming. This is the first time in 3 years we've been able to have this event. So thank you. Today is an auspicious date because it's 1 year since we reopened, and I'd like to thank all of you. No applause for you, because it's really through the generosity of our board, of the federal grant programs, of our members, of our donors, that we were able to get through this really difficult period. So our members deserve a great vote of thanks, and we all feel very strongly indebted to you. I have been programming the premieres for many years now, and for many years with my colleagues, Mike Maggiore and Sonia Chung. Mike, in particular, we have worked together for decades. He has taught me to appreciate Romanian humor. He has also stayed my hand when I've tried to write emails to the New York Times or the New Yorker or anyone else who I think does not appreciate what we're doing, as they should. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mike.
Thanks, Karen. And I'd like to introduce our Deputy Director, Sonia Chung. Sonia was our development director for 5 years in the 2000s. And when she decided to leave to embark on a literary career, we were very sad, but we were excited for her. And she went on to write books and novels, poems, and she was a consultant for the Poetry Society of America and Housing Works Bookstore, and she worked as a university professor at NYU and Columbia School for the Arts. Happily, she returned to Film Forum in 2020 as deputy director, and she's involved in, and she is involved in all aspects of our work, including publicity and marketing, board development, and partnerships. And of course, as Karen mentioned, she's also one of the 3 programmers of the premieres. She actually started attending the Toronto Film Festival with me in 2018 and 2019. And somehow she manages to do all of this while being artist in residence at Skidmore College. In any case, it's my great pleasure to welcome Sonia Chung.
Thank you, Mike and Karen. I want to say a quick word as sort of the newbie on this programming team that it's such an honor and a privilege to work with people who have such depth and breadth of experience, and that my role I see as being both really learning from them and also bringing something new from where I come from. So I have the pleasure of introducing Elspeth Carroll to my left. Elspeth is Film Forum's Associate Repertory Programmer. Since joining us in 2015, 7 years ago, she has worked alongside our Director of Repertory Programming, Bruce Goldstein, who you will meet in a moment, on our classics series and retrospectives. She works with distributors and archives to source some rare and high-quality prints. She organizes special events. She connects with funders and co-presenters. She produces print and digital materials for the series. She has also curated programs, including 60s Verite, which some of you might remember, a 64-film series that explored the direct cinema movement of the 60s, and also The Hour of Liberation, Decolonizing Cinema, 1961 to 81. Elspeth.
Thank you. I'm pleased to introduce Bruce Goldstein. Bruce Goldstein created Film Forum's repertory program in 1987 and has built it into one of the most expansive and influential repertory programs around. He forged relationships with archives and studios that have allowed us to present the wide breadth of programming we're known for. In 1997, he founded his distribution company, Rialto Pictures, which has provided us with some of Film Forum's biggest repertory hits, Army of Shadows, The Third Man, Mr. Klein, and most recently, La Piscine. Bruce has been counted amongst the essential people or places of New York by Time Out. He's a person. And called the Michael Jordan of film programmers by the Village Voice.
Without the hype.
He's been honored by the National Board of Review, the New York Film Critics Circle and Anthology Film Archives, In 2009, he was the recipient of the San Francisco Film Festival's prestigious Mel Novikov Award. In 2002, he received the French Order of Chevalier of Arts and Letters. And in 2012, he was the recipient of the first Lifetime Achievement Award in Film, ever given by George Eastman House. And he taught me everything I know about programming.
I did, didn't I? Well, merci beaucoup. So who do I get to introduce? Now that delightful star of stage and television, Miss Arlene Francis. You have to be of a certain age to know that joke. I want to say something. Thank you. And by the way, Elspeth, they all are. There was a credit in a Chris Marker film for a woman named what was her name? Catherine Kadu, and she was the translator for Kurosawa and Nakadai. And when we had Tatsuya Nakadai here, she was the translator. I said, why does he want a French woman to translate? Her mind was incredible. She translated, I guess, from French to English to Japanese, like that, So she's got a credit in Chris Marker's AK, which is a film about the making of Kurosawa's Ran, and her credit was indispensable. And that's how I feel about Elspeth. You all speak French, okay. I want to plug our new series because I have a bully pulpit, and this is the most crowded we've ever had for this event, right? Right. You might think that we planned this because of the recent passing of Sidney Poitier in January. No, Donald Bogle has been working. We've been working with Donald for about 3 years. We had this in the works. This was originally intended to commemorate the 70th anniversary of Sidney Poitier's feature film debut and Joe Mankiewicz's No Way Out, which we're showing today. And also, you might say, well, where are the black women? Where are the women in this series? Well, it's a sequel to the 2019 festival we did called Black Women, which was very expansive. And today, you'll have a chance. I'm staying. 12:30 Blackboard Jungle, followed by No Way Out, Sidney Poitier's debut when he was only 23. An extraordinary movie for Hollywood in 1950, co-starring Richard Widmark, followed by The Defiant Ones with Tony Curtis. And so we have the prime show tonight is In the Heat of the Night, one of the most entertaining movies of the 1960s. It's a masterpiece. And then at night, our late show tonight is Blackula with William Marshall. What a lineup. Okay. So we start the questions now?
Oh, thank you. So I don't have to stand on tippy toes. 3 years ago, when I came, I requested Fred Zinnemann Festival because his son is still alive, and because at the time he had the distinction, after William Wyler, of directing the most Oscar-winning performances. Now he's third, Marty Scorsese. But I'd still like a Fred Zinnemann Film Festival. Thanks.
Bruce, comments?
I will address that. I think it's a great idea. We are showing a Fred Zinnemann film. We're doing a Montgomery Clift retrospective, which was also originally intended for 2020 in June. And we're trying to get Monty's first film, which was The Search, which is an amazing movie, but there are no prints of it. Sometimes we can't do retrospectives because there's not enough materials out there. So let's start with getting Warner Brothers is looking into making us something on The Search. If you've never seen it, it's an extraordinary film. It's an MGM film shot entirely in post-war, Czechoslovakia? Oh, you've never seen it. So, yeah, I think Fred Zinnemann's a very interesting director. He began as a photographer, by the way. He came to New York in 1931 and took some amazing pictures of the city. Someone very interesting, yeah.
We have a question.
We'll put it on the back, middle burner.
We have a question here in the middle of the house.
Hi, I wanted to ask about the recent, this is for the repertory folks, the recent trend of digital cinema projection and 35 millimeter projection going away, and I'm wondering how you weigh the convenience of digital cinema projection versus the quality of 35.
We can both, okay, but this is the last one for repertory. You have to move it on. Yeah. Yeah, well, digital gives us a lot of options that we didn't have before. So we always do have to weigh digital versus 35. Now, something everyone should know, not every film is available in a print, and not every film is available in digital. And some of the prints we were able to get in the past, we can't get anymore because 35 millimeter is becoming really expensive, and those archival prints are now, my friend Hayden Guest from Harvard says they're like Fabergé eggs now. And some of the prints we used to get from Warner Brothers, for example, they won't give us because they're unique and they're archive copies. They don't want to let them out. So digital gives us a great freedom of choice. Sometimes, though, we have the choice of digital and 35. In the recent Bogart Festival, we had mostly 35 because most of them weren't on DCP anyway. So I said, well, let's play Casablanca in 35 millimeter because Warner Brothers had made us a new print just a few years ago, and it was a blockbuster. We could have shown a 4K restoration. It was our decision to play a print. In the time when we first played that print, it played all over and it got mangled. And we got a lot of complaints. You know, when I first started going to repertory theaters when I was a teen, all the prints were like that. You know, they had choppy and dialogue was missing, but audiences aren't used to that anymore. They're used to pristine copies, no interruption of dialogue. So yes, we have to make this decision. What would you say?
I mean, as you've said, sometimes a lot of the time it's not a decision.
Yeah, a lot of times it's not a decision. We have only one choice, and we're delighted when, you know, if we're doing a retrospective like Montgomery Clift, and the only, you know, if you do Montgomery Clift, can you not have A Place in the Sun? No, you cannot, right? So if it's only available in DCP, of course we're going to show that. That's the answer. I guess, did I answer it sufficiently? Okay.
I would just add that you're still showing a lot of 35.
Oh, we
We're
show.
showing
I mean-
a ton
I
of
mean, in the
35
Poitiers
because
Festival,
most things
Yeah.
aren't in DCPs. Yeah.
Actually, and I think that was a choice on a lot of them.
No, that's
Oh,
all that's available.
except for Rashomon,
and
we
most
showed-
of them we had to bring into the country.
Yeah, we imported, by the way, we went to great expense to import prints from Japan for that. 35.
Seven Samurai was the only one that was a little beat up.
Well, that's because it's so popular. Yeah.
Bruce, how do you think the projectionists would respond to that question in terms of
Well,
which
you know
they
what?
prefer or what
We have
it's-
a fantastic projection team, and last night we showed the Buster Keaton film Sherlock Jr., which is about a projectionist. So I had our projectionist take a curtain call, Noel McCarthy, and Raymond Adderson is up in the booth. And I know that Noel, I don't know about Raymond, not Raymond, if you, she actually prefers running 35 millimeter. She loves handling the film. Okay, ask.
We have a question
Yeah.
here in the back.
I'd just like to compliment all of you for making the last 40 years of my life fulfilling. My question is more in terms of how you manage to balance your desire to show the best of new documentary and repertory films according to your curator's desires and taste, and the need to survive. Because obviously some of those films are not going to be well attended, even though those are the ones I like to see. And then you'll come across something that will play for 3 months. And I'm wondering to what extent, if you can be frank about it, you program with the revenue stream in mind.
Actually, we don't. I mean, that sounds like I'm not being candid. But the truth is, we really do look at new films, and Bruce and Elsbeth, obviously, classic work, and base our decision-making on the caliber of the work. Sometimes you think something's going to be, you know, strong for a week or two, and it surprises us. La Piscine, tremendously successful, played it for months. Drive My Car, 3-hour Japanese movie. Who knew it was going to be nominated for an Oscar? Who knew it was going to win the Oscar for Best Foreign Film? That's a difficult film, and a 3-hour Japanese movie, normally we'd be happy with 2 moderately successful weeks. As you say, the films that are the least successful are often your favorites. I would say that's true for me as well. Babillard Context, we opened yesterday. It is a 2-hour collage film of rare material salvaged from German and Russian archives of the materials which were shot, much of it by German soldiers, prior to the massacre in 1941 in Ukraine and post-massacre. There is actually no footage of the massacre itself, thankfully, because it's hard enough to deal with what happened on either side. But this is a brilliant film, and I understand why audiences are, frankly, they're not running to see it. I mean, I think we made $1,200 in its opening night last night, and that's really kind of sad when you consider that this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience to see this material. So I would agree with you that some of the best films, the most exciting films, the rarest films, fewer people will see.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to add that, and I'm going to pander a little bit, but candidly, that really what we're thinking about is you as our audience, that we are very thankful that we operate in a city and in a place where we don't have to think that way. We don't have to think this is a difficult film, nobody's going to come to it. And also just, again, sort of from the new person perspective, a related thing that I learned joining this programming team is we watch a lot of films, and we watch pretty much everything that comes to us. We don't have, I come from the literary world where editors will have kind of the slush pile, and the interns and the peons will look at those before, the senior staff look at them, and we're all the peons and the interns here. We look at we look at everything. We're not just looking for the Cannes Festival winners. We're not just, we really are open to what will surprise us.
Maybe, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, as most of you know, we added a fourth screen in 2018, and that has actually helped us hold on to the bigger hits. And La Piscine could not have played for 4 months if we didn't have that flexibility. Same with Drive My Car. So that's also helped us balance the hits with the films that don't.
La
draw as
Piscine
much.
also played during the flood. Which, Elspeth, could you address this in terms of repertory about?
Well, I mean, sort of on the other side, not what sort of audience we're going to draw, but what we're spending. We have something called like a loss leader. There are films that we feel like we have to show, which we're bringing in from another country, which we're soft titling. So we're
In the shipping.
yeah,
from
which
other-
we're shipping. We're paying someone to create subtitles for and to run them. But we think they're essential. And one of the really wonderful things about working here is we're allowed to do that. Like, there's not someone sort of standing over us with a calculator.
Karen has never given me a budget. I'm serious. I'm serious. We've never had a budget. I'll do what I want.
But this is made possible really by dint of the fact that we're a nonprofit, that we have federal and state and city money and individual support, and without all that, we would be in a really tough spot. We'd always have to say, is this going to make money? Isn't it? We don't have to make that calculation because we have other financial resources. So all credit to you folks.
We have a question right here.
So, since you reopened, you've done Noir, Bogart, the New York movies, Harryhausen movies for the kids on weekends, and I can't tell you how much I realized that I missed the film theater experience until we couldn't have it for those years. And coming back and seeing all the stuff you guys have been doing since you reopened, just thank you so much.
Mike, while we were locked down, Mike was pretty much managing our digital, and I think he did an amazing job. We did better with the digital than any other country of theater in the country.
Virtual cinema.
Virtual
yeah.
cinema. But we all felt it is so boring. It is so boring. It's kind of a soulless experience watching films on that's my opinion. It's so much better.
And we dropped it as soon as we could. As soon
Yes,
as we
exactly.
could. Yeah.
And it was almost impossible to do repertory on virtual because, first run, they're not licensed to streaming yet, but pretty much every major repertory title is on Netflix or on Amazon. Well, not Netflix. They don't have any classics. You know what I mean.
Returning for a moment to the strange films that you choose to show anyway. I came to the last showing of Written in Fire. Is that the right title?
Writing with Fire?
Writing with Fire. There were 6 people in the house. Academy Award nominee. QED.
Well, okay, yeah. So Writing with Fire is a documentary that was nominated for Best Documentary, but that nomination didn't come until earlier this year. We had opened it in late November, and I think if our opening had been more in sync with the Academy campaign, which was pretty robust, we might have had a better chance of drawing an audience. But I think it was a case of just bad timing.
COVID also made it very difficult for foreign filmmakers to travel. Either they couldn't travel or they were afraid to travel. So normally we would get a certain percentage of filmmakers from abroad to come and introduce their work and to give interviews and be on radio and do feature stories. And I think with Writing with Fire, as enthusiastic as they were Indian filmmakers, they did not come here, timed to this opening. Their thinking was very much timed to the Academy Award nomination, which ultimately did not pan out for them. But it was a wonderful film. It was about women who started a news service who are themselves considered untouchable, and yet they managed to really grasp power from dust. I mean, you see them confronting political figures and the police and saying, how come you never looked into these rape charges, and stuff that you would never see on the news. It was an extraordinary film.
There's a question in the back here.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much. My wife and I love the Film Forum. We've been members for 10 years. I've been coming here for over 20 years. And I agree with Andre Gregory, who said that he could imagine New York without the Statue of Liberty, but not without the Film Forum. I completely agree. And I'm actually going for my doctorate, and I'm studying the humanizing and civic and educative value of movies. And but the whole concept of me even understanding that cinema could be more than entertainment comes from being a member and coming here. So I wanted to ask anybody on the panel, how would you grade Hollywood right now? I mean, at a time of, we see an erosion in our democracy, we see global warming, right? We had a movie called Don't Look Up, which was talking about global warming, which was mocked at the Oscars by Amy Schumer, right? So how would you grade Hollywood? What kind of job is it doing during this crisis time?
How would you grade Hollywood?
I would give it an F, okay? Because my doctoral thesis is titled Imagine a Hollywood for the Greater Good. And I can't imagine, and again, I'm getting that notion, I've gotten that notion of possibility from coming here and being exposed to the avant-garde, to the French New Wave, and that the fact that cinema can be more than just bottom line entertainment. So how would, do you have any thoughts about, after the slap, any comments on Hollywood? Yes.
I'm an educator, so I can give grades. I don't know. Maybe I'm going to say B-, which is better than C+, I guess. There's a lot of dreck, obviously. There's a lot of mindless escape, but I have a hard time, especially given the pandemic, judging anybody for wanting some escape or some sort of pure entertainment. One of the things I'll just mention that I find encouraging is that we've seen a kind of a trend of some of the young filmmakers of color who have debuted their films here. I'm thinking of Shaka King, who did Judas and the Black Messiah, Chloe Zhao, who just did a Marvel movie, Bassam Tariq, who's also doing a Marvel movie. The movies they did here were their first films, I believe. So Songs My Brothers Taught Me was Newlyweds was Shaka King. Songs My Brothers Taught Me was Chloe Zhao, and Mogul Mowgli was Bassam Tariq's film. And they've all been tapped now. I think, the studios are seeing that there's really, really good talent that they need to make these big movies. And so there are at least sort of smart, talented young filmmakers of color who are making some of those films and thinking about what makes a quality version of those films. So maybe that's C+, I don't know.
We have a question right here, sir.
Hi, good morning. My husband and I were here the day that you reopened, and one of the welcome back screens, which I thought was a great idea, by the way, was showed that Nico 1988 was playing. And it took me back to when he actually came with me, which surprised me, but I loved that movie. And there will be a question. One of the most horrifying and funny lines, and the audience went nuts, was when Nico says later in the film, "We need heroin, man." I'm just curious, how you found that, which is a sign about this audience that we all just erupted. But how did you find that movie? I just love that anyone would make a movie about
Nico
her.
1988.
Nico 1988.
Yeah, I saw that at the Venice Film Festival, which is where it premiered, I think in 2017, I would say, something like that. We had shown, back in the 90s, we had shown a documentary called Nico Icon, which we thought was fascinating. And Elaine Delon is referenced in that film, and not in a positive
Yeah, she was
sense.
his lover, no?
Yeah, well, he never, yeah, right. Well, we won't go into
Lover.
detail, but
I said lover.
but yeah, Nico, I mean, we're fans of the Velvet Underground, fans of Nico. We kind of broke our own window rule with Todd Haynes' Velvet Underground documentary last year. But I thought the performance in Nico 1988 was magnificent. It was just such a transformative performance, and the actress actually came to the theater on opening night to do a Q&A, which was fascinating. I mean, she looks completely different from Nico. Yeah.
That film did no business, yeah.
Maybe watching Nico in 1988 was not the most commercial angle to her life. She was, if you focused on Nico in the 60s, maybe it would have been sexier.
Yeah.
We have a question here in the back.
Yeah, hi. I want to talk about outreach. Film Forum is such a beacon of movie-going love and all, but somehow our group doesn't expand all that much. I'm wondering what kind of programs you guys have in mind for that terms. I know you're doing some work with schools, but just in general.
Great question.
Yeah, sure, I can speak to that. That's a great point. Some of that has to do with the fact that cinemas are, in fact, neighborhood joints to some degree, right? We draw from the neighborhood and Brooklyn to some degree, and the neighborhood has changed a lot over the last 48 years. But part of my job is to do outreach and to work with organizations, community organizations, and schools. So I've been in this job since February of 2020, so we've been focusing on that a lot. So when we see an affinity with certain film and certain groups, some of the groups we're working with for Poitiers, for example, is the Schomburg Center for Black Research up in Harlem. We're working with another group called Weeksville in Brooklyn. We work with the Asian American Writers Workshop, and a number of other arts and cultural organizations. So one of the things that we do is called co-presentation, and it's pretty simple. We just ask them to promote films to their audiences. Everyone's got an e-newsletter list. Everyone's got 5 different kinds of social media, and we will often offer them discount tickets to their members, and we'll invite someone from their organization to come and either introduce a film or talk about the film afterwards, or bring a moderator for the Q&A. So it's become more of ongoing partnerships with other organizations to be involved. And we go through all the films on the premiere side and the repertory side to identify different organizations that we can work with. So that's a piece of what we're doing. And we also have an advisory committee, which is a group of 10 individuals who are outside of us and who can help us grow our audience, as you were describing.
Oh, yeah, also speaking of co-presentations, we are planning a 3-week series this summer with the Jewish Museum, with an exhibit that they have planned for, I guess, like the next 6 months. You wanna say anything?
Focusing on
The years 1961 to 64.
which at first I thought was not a great idea, but when we started putting together, I said, this is fantastic, actually. So that's something we're doing with the Jewish Museum, and I think we're going to have reciprocal well, you can look it up. I mean, 61 to James Bond, and then the Beatles, but Lawrence of Arabia, Doctor Strange, but a lot of more obscure stuff too. But we're going to have reciprocal memberships for the period of the festival, I believe, where members can go to the Jewish Museum, and members of the Jewish Museum can get our discount.
We have a question right here.
Do you have any influence to keep Hollywood from doing a Keaton biopic?
Our influence is so amazing.
I just want.
They did one in 1957 with
I know, and
Donald
it did
O'Connor, which
and
is-
it did so well.
it was horrible.
And I just wanted to actually, with that, mention that it's been an extraordinary experience being able to read the Curtis biography at the same time that I'm seeing the films, because there are some of us in New York who are vaudeville fans. And
There's two of us.
And so we know, like at this point I have like a 3D map of vaudeville New York in my head, and it's so wonderful to be able to see the Keaton films and to see vaudeville on film.
I agree. And
it's an
by the way,
extraordinary
we've
thing.
been doing Keaton Festival since I began. And the source for the prints was another company. We're now using the new restorations from Lobster Films in Paris, and they're so much better than what we've been showing for 35 years. They're amazing. There's material that aren't in the other prints even. They're sparkling, all of them, right? They're sparkling. We're talking about our Buster Keaton Festival, which is not we call it a vertical festival because it's not every day. But tomorrow, for example, we're showing The Navigator, which was his biggest moneymaker, one of his best silent features, and The Boat, one of his best two-reelers, with Steve Stern at the piano. They've all been selling out. So buy your tickets right after this for tomorrow at 2:45. And you're also referring to James Curtis's definitive new biography of Buster, which he was at our opening weekend, and it's available at the concession, which you can buy on your way out.
I'd like to take a moment just to go back to knocking Hollywood more than anyone else has. I think you're all too kind. Watching those Oscars, I mean, talking about giving them a grade, I wouldn't even grade them. What you have to remember about the movie business is that's what it is. It's a business. Selling mattresses is a business. Selling Coke is a business. The way you make the most money is you sell the most of that product to the greatest number of people. And the way Hollywood makes the most amount of money is by dumbing down the product. I mean, if everybody likes Coke, you make more money. If everybody likes Spider-Man, you make more money. Don't Look Up is going to appeal to a segment of the population and the biggest segment of the world population. And Hollywood is selling movies worldwide. It's not just a U.S. audience. I think it's like 17 to 24-year-old males. I mean, they will see a film again and again and again, and they're all over the world, and they like cars exploding. So I mean, consider what they're selling, why they're selling it. This is not for a great many of these people. This is not an art form. This is not about communicating something. This is really about the bottom line. And we are not insensitive to the bottom line here. We're concerned about paying our bills, obviously. But our raison d'etre is to show good movies, period.
I should say that we think of the golden age of Hollywood. They made just as much crap in those years, but we try to show the good stuff, And they make more crap today than probably in the golden years, because there was always prestige pictures in the old days. I don't know do they even call anything prestige anymore? No.
And I'll add, we had a big upswing of our 17 to 24-year-old males at all of our Mifune Samurai films. So they're out there and they're coming to good movies. Here's another question.
I feel really thankful for the programming. It's been great. But I've noticed with the Rialto releases, the trailers you make, they set tonal expectations that aren't really met by the movies. Is how I feel. Yeah.
I,
The trailers
I
are
produce
too good.
I produce those trailers and write them.
Yeah, I was curious who did, but like for like Red Circle or even like Mr. Klein and the Servant, I feel like the trailers they're engaging in
Well,
themselves.
first of all, trailers have always been misleading. You know that.
Yeah, well, I guess I was going to ask, like, is that like a choice you're making for business or
No, well,
Okay.
you want to make it as enticing as possible. The thing with foreign, when Miramax, we won't mention the owner of Miramax, but when Miramax used to do French trailers, they pretended it wasn't in French. They always had a narrator, but we have subtitles in our trailers because we know the audience is very special. We just try to make it as you take an older movie and try to update it, make it. The marketing has to look fresh today. That's what
Are
we're
you
looking
able
to do.
Like when you make a trailer, are you able to use the songs in the movies?
Yes.
Is that like by default?
Sometimes we can't. That's a good question. Sometimes we can't use the music. Yeah.
Okay.
Music's very important to cutting a trailer, by the way. Without music, you can't cut a trailer.
I have
Not
another
really.
question in the back, in the front, and then I'll go to all of you in the back.
Hi, I've been, as of this July, I will be a member of Film Forum for 40 years. I just started collecting Social Security. I mention all that because I'm old enough to remember when television programming, movies, TV series, were, for the most part, were bad or mediocre at best. Now there's a lot of very high quality television. And I think I know how you're going to respond to my question, but do you feel any sense of competition or pressure with some of the very high quality television that's out now?
Yes. No, I think you're absolutely right. There's some fabulous television. I mean, that feels more like a, 15 chapter novel. And yeah, I watch it, sure.
Yeah, and I think I think the industry landscape has changed so much now because Karen has been programming documentaries as theatrical runs for decades before it was kind of considered hip or cool. And now there are streaming platforms that are going after documentaries at great volume. So you have, we can go to the Sundance Film Festival and see a number of documentaries that we think are great. Summer of Soul is one of them. And the players involved who are going to put down a lot of money for them are just crowding out all of the indie distributors. So those films are some of those films are out of reach for us, but there are other independently made films and documentaries that we are able to get our hands on. And one of them was a recent success for us called The Automat, which is a completely independently made documentary. It was not affiliated with a major streamer, and we were able to book it directly with the filmmaker.
And still playing.
And for sure, it's a live question. What's going to happen post-pandemic? We're not post-pandemic, right? We're still, but for instance, we held a young patrons event recently. They're apples and oranges, and I think that's how we want to sell it. That coming to the theater is a different thing, and I think after these 2 years, young people, older people, everyone wants to come out. Everyone wants to get out and be among other people. So we had this group of young people who they were so happy just to gather, come see the Automat, have a glass of wine, IRL. So hopefully that will last. Hopefully people will remember what they missed, being with other humans in the dark.
Now I have a question. When do we get to start serving wine?
We have to get a license to serve alcohol.
But
and
it's now legal, right?
It's not. It's legal, but the license takes 6 months.
Oh, well.
So
we
we've
can wait.
applied. And we hope to sell beer.
And I will
wine.
be on the selection committee for the vintage that we're going to serve. Reasonable. It'll be reasonable.
We have a question here in the back.
And thank you so very much for mentioning Writing with Fire, because I was one of the initial funders for that film, and I was really moved by it. It's a great one. Don't miss it. But I wanted to ask you, because I'm so upset about the New York Times not covering films when they're coming out as films, but only when they're starting to stream. Is that the case? And what can I do about that? Because that's very upsetting to me.
Well, the New York Times is reviewing theatrical runs, and they've been reviewing our theatrical openings on the day that we open them. The Times is also running streaming films with, I've been surprised by how many of those streaming films they've run, so that it is crowding out reviews or more prominent coverage for films that are only playing in theaters. But we haven't, I don't believe we've missed, I don't think any of our,
We haven't missed any
knock on
reviews.
wood somewhere,
But the
yeah.
Times, years ago, the Times used to say that a film was opening at Film Forum, which was accurate and which was the only theater the film was opening in. It is called, after all, the New York Times. Today, they run a piece in yesterday's Times saying Babi Yar Context, playing in theaters. It's not playing in theaters. It's playing in one theater in America, maybe in the world. Why do they do that? I have, racked
they
my
wanna be a
brain over
national
this.
paper.
And it's because they want the presence. They want to give the appearance that everything they're covering is available nationwide. It is not. That film, Babi Yar Context, did not get covered by the Wall Street Journal. Why? Because it wasn't opening in theaters. It was only opening here.
The Times is still really important. Sometimes we discover they never reviewed a revival, and we discovered they never reviewed La Piscine in 1970. And that's why we got a Times, not the little blurb. We used to get these big articles from Vincent Canby on our repertory. Some of them were like 3 full pages. That's like $200,000 worth of free publicity. Now they have the thing in the Friday paper. We get that much space. We got a full review on La Piscine, and that's why one of the reasons why it ran so long.
We've got time for a couple very brief answers from our panel. Here's a question from the back.
Yes, 2 questions, very, very short. The first one is about silent movies. Do you plan to expand silent movies? I am thinking of Fritz Lang Festival, Abel Gance Festival. And then I have a converse question. Why do you play movies at such a loud sound level in general?
That's a question for the projectionist, I think. We have a sound level, don't we? Why do we?
Well, you
What
wanna
was the
talk about
first part of the
silence?
question?
Silent movies.
Expanding silent film, Bruce.
Expanding it?
Expanding the repertoire of
Showing
silent
more
film.
silent films like Abel Gance and
Well,
Fritz
we
Lang.
can't show Napoleon because we don't have the screen for a triptych. I was involved with the presentation in Oakland, California, which took place in a 2,000-seat movie palace, and it cost $500,000 just to create the projection room. Even though Karen hasn't given me a budget, I don't think that's feasible. But we are doing a tribute to Kevin Brownlow, which was supposed to be 2020, and we're going to be showing a lot of the films he restored. Hopefully it'll be in the fall, and it'll have a lot of rare films. We've shown silence for 35 years. We've done all sorts of festivals. I don't know when you've joined us, but yeah, I try to put in as much silence as we can, actually.
In terms of volume, I believe the volume for every film is set at the beginning of the run. Now, maybe there's an issue with the projectionist not following that setting, or I don't know, but certainly ushers should be checking on volume, and if you're unhappy with the volume, you should say something to staff, because that can really ruin your experience.
And also, volume is adjusted according to the size of the audience, because people absorb sound. So it's louder if there are more people. It should be lower when there's, what was that film that only had 4 people?
There's a question in the back here.
My question is, I'm curious about your relationship with the theaters in New York that do things slightly similar to yours, like Film Society of Lincoln Center, maybe the Quad. Are they competitors? Do you work with each other? How does that work?
The first,
Well, we're certainly, I think in the case of, let's say, the Quad, Angelica, IFC, Film at Lincoln Center, I think we're often going after the same titles, and it's really up to the distributor as to how they want to open the film. We used to have a rule that everything we opened had to be an exclusive, and we relaxed that a while ago, I would say about 15 years ago. And we had agreed to open a film day and date with an Upper West Side theater, but usually no more than one other theater in New York City. Distributors have their own preferences in terms of theaters, but I think the important thing is that we're watching as much as we can, and we're making offers on films that we feel enthusiastic about.
And we do share. We often share with Film at Lincoln Center. And that's the distributor's decision. Sometimes we'll say, look, this is a small film, and if you want us to play it, we really can't share it because there's not going to be enough audience response to divide it two ways. But most often, if the distributor thinks it's makes sense to have it on two screens, up, down, and down, we will do that. Thank you all. Thank you all so very much
Thank you
for
very much.
coming.
Have a great Saturday afternoon.